Welcome to House Calls, Real Docs, Real Talk. I'm your host, Mercedes Fuller, back for more healthy conversation today. We're talking about one of my favorite subjects. That's sleep. Sleep is an incredible, important component for your overall health. And some of us experience real difficulties with sleep, like sleep apnea. Sleep apnea is a big problem and it deserves our full attention today. So let's get started with this amazing conversation. With me this morning is Dr. Mariell Jessup, Chief Science and Medical Officer for the American Heart Association. Dr. Jessup, welcome.
Thank you so much, Mercedes. It's great to be with you and talk about my favorite subject too, sleep.
Absolutely. It's great to have you here. And I think we're going to help so many people as we engage in this dialogue. Let's jump into today's discussion with health in the headlines. Good health is always newsworthy, so each week we select one current headline that ties back to our topic at hand, and we ask our expert to respond. This week's entry is from Everyday Health, and it references a really interesting study that was conducted in Europe. The study and the article is entitled, Study Reveals More Exercise, Less Sitting Could Prevent Sleep Apnea. Now, Dr. Jessup, what do you think about these findings?
Well, they're not surprising, first of all, because for adults, although we don't completely understand all of the connections that make sleep apnea so much of a problem in adults, one of the big risk factors for sleep apnea is obesity and also a sedentary lifestyle. So I think that we know that one of the best ways to lose weight is through more activity, more physical activity. It doesn't surprise me that a study showed that the more active people you are, more active a person is, the less likely they are to have sleep apnea.
Yeah, absolutely. So that means I need to kick my exercise into high gear.
Well, I think I like the title of that article because it's not so much that you have to be sweating at the gym in high gear, as you say. It's just not sitting all the time, which we're all so prone to do, especially during the pandemic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So much great information. Thank you, Doctor, for shedding light on that article. Let's get into our main segment to answer viewer questions. We call this segment You Ask, We Answer. Dr. Jessup, there are a lot of questions waiting just for you in our queue. So here we go. Our first question comes to us from Eleanor in St. Charles, Louisiana. Why is sleep so important to overall health and well-being?
Well, it's such a great question. And I think doctors and scientists haven't found all of the reasons why sleep is so important, but we know it certainly it is. And we know, in fact, that if people are deprived of sleep for not very long, just a couple of days, they have profound mental deterioration so that they begin to hallucinate, they are disoriented, and have a number of other physical complaints such as stomach pain or chest pain. So it appears as if our body was designed so that there needs to be a time where the brain and all of the rest of the body that's controlled by the brain needs to have a quiescent period that we call sleep.
Absolutely. Sleep is necessary. Ruby from Tennessee asked this question. How are sleep apnea and heart disease related?
It's a great question. And for example, in people that have a particular form of heart disease called heart failure, where the heart just doesn't pump well enough to supply the body with enough oxygen to do all of its activities, the estimates are that at least half of people with heart failure have some form of sleep apnea or at least sleep disturbance. So I think that is a really important statistic. But the risk factors, as I've already said, for sleep apnea, one of which is obesity, is also travels with other risk factors for heart disease. So a little bit, it's the chicken before the egg. People may have obesity or lack of physical exercise, or maybe smokers or drink too much alcohol. That leads to a higher risk for heart disease, but it also are those prevalent conditions that can be associated with sleep apnea too. So they travel together an awful lot in the same person.
Wow. Wow. Doctor, here's one from Fernando in Tampa Bay. How is sleep apnea treated in adults?
So the good news is there are multiple ways to treat sleep apnea, some of which depends on why they have sleep apnea. So some people have sleep apnea because they have a thick tongue or an abnormal configuration of their, what we call the soft palate. We don't call it the throat. Sometimes just a simple mouth guard can move the tongue forward a little bit and help with some forms of sleep apnea. Other people are told, go ahead and try and lose some weight, try some other positions, use special pillows, etc. Those are our treatments. Some people actually need to have a supportive breathing device that we call CPAP, which is continuous positive airway pressure, which actually keeps the airway and the lungs from closing down and stopping the breathing. We've heard a lot more about CPAP because there's all kinds of famous people that talk about using CPAP and cleaning CPAP, lots of commercials about that, including William Shatner, who's about to go up in space in Jeff Bezos's rocket ship. So he's 90 years old and has talked about sleep apnea for many times on commercials. And if you look at him, he's a classic example of somebody who has a big, thick neck and a big chest, and he has sleep apnea as well. So there are multiple treatments for sleep apnea, but there are sleep specialists now that oftentimes one needs to see, and they'll help evaluate you for sleep apnea.
Absolutely. That's great. I highly recommend that people, if they're struggling with this, that they go see one of those sleep specialists. That's a great insight, doctor. Here's a question from Rita. She says, can children experience sleep apnea?
Yes, they can. And they are different from adults in that they don't necessarily have to be obese or drink alcohol, of course. The most common reason children get sleep apnea is problems with their tonsils or their adenoids. And so that's important to note. And also children, like any time with children, when they're unhappy, there is something is bothering them, they can't really articulate it, but they'll be cranky and misbehave. And so if your child who normally is relatively well behaved and plays with children and follows rules, and suddenly they're really misbehaving and cranky and lots of temper tantrums, it should cross your mind whether they're not sleeping well because of sleep apnea.
Mm-hmm. And doctor, you started to touch on some of the symptoms, and Michelle sent us this question. What are some of the symptoms that I should watch out for sleep apnea in my children?
So in the children, as I mentioned, that they tend to really be irritable, not follow normal behavior patterns, really be difficult in school. And that's because they're not getting a good night's sleep. Just think of all the children in all of our encounters when they really start to misbehave and you say, uh-oh, somebody needs their nap. That's what happens with children. Whereas with adults, when they have sleep apnea, because they haven't gotten a good night's sleep, they tend to have what we call daytime sleepiness, meaning they fall asleep really easily. We've all fallen asleep in front of a TV show in our chair, but these are people that fall asleep even in the middle of a conversation or more dangerously while they're driving a car.
Wow. Wow. Loretta from Mississippi wonders, how is sleep apnea diagnosed in children and adolescents?
Well, I think it's becoming more apparent that this could be a problem with children and adolescents. And so, like so many things, it's first to go talk to the pediatrician or your primary doctor and really be very clear about what you suspect is happening, and a physical exam as well to see if there is a problem with the obstruction in the throat from enlarged tonsils or enlarged adenoid. Even in children, a sleep study will give, which is what is actually done for both adults and children, where children are monitored and adults are monitored while they sleep in a lab or at home with devices that can measure their breathing and their brain activity. But oftentimes with children, just a physical exam will help raise the suspicion that sleep apnea may be occurring.
Here's one from B in Indiana, and she asked this: what can put my child at risk for developing sleep apnea?
It's a great question, and as mentioned, the primary risk factor for children is enlarged tonsils. So if your children have been told somewhere during one of their physical exams that they have enlarged tonsils or they have frequent sore throats, it may be something to bring up with your pediatrician.
Very good. Here's one question from Martha: how is sleep apnea treated in children, and are the treatments effective?
Well, I think this area is a new area of investigation. There were many of us may remember in years past that pediatricians often recommended tonsillectomy so that practically everybody you know of a certain age had no tonsils. That pendulum has swung so that there aren't as much tonsillectomies being done on children. And so it's possible that there's a relationship to more recognition that enlarged tonsils are causing sleep apnea. So a tonsillectomy might be an answer, but certainly a physician needs to understand that enlarged tonsils is definitely the cause of sleep apnea. And then, in fact, children are misbehaving or cranky because they have sleep apnea. So there's a couple of steps that have to be made there.
Doctor, our time is winding down swiftly, and we have just one more question, and it is from Bill. Bill wonders, how does sleep apnea in adults differ from the condition in children?
So I think in adults, sleep apnea, as we've already talked about, travels with people who are obese, maybe have used too much alcohol, not very physically active, have a big, thick neck. Those are and have cardiovascular disease. So that is the classic symptoms in adults, whereas children can be of any size or shape, and it tends to be more around issues of their soft palate, including tonsillectomy. So they're very different scenarios, and as a result, the treatment is often different as well.
So that about wraps up our show, Dr. Jessup. I think you have opened our eyes to sleep disorders today. The pun was intended. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before leaving us today?
Well, thank you. I do think it's something, especially in adults. The classic symptom, besides the daytime sleepiness, is the person that snores really loud. And so I think if you see somebody that you know, or their sleep partner says, boy, did they snore all night, every night, and they're falling asleep in their chair, sleep apnea may be a cause.
Thank you so much, Doctor. We always look forward to your visits with us. Friends, you can find any of our previous shows at the AHA's House Calls YouTube playlist. Thank you for tuning in and asking so many thoughtful questions. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other, and I hope you get some good rest.
Learn more about House Calls, Real Docs, Real Talk, and submit your questions at heart.org/housecalls.